Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Lisa, thank you for being here. My name is Kelly Rodriguez Curry, and we are excited to share with you tonight. We have got Lisa Estrada joining us, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Again, my name is Kelly Rodriguez Curry, and I am the Director of Graduate Studies for the Seattle University School of Law. I've got my contact information here. I will share it again at the end of the program, so you don't have to jot it down. I am new to the School of Law, but I'm not new to Seattle University. I'm actually a 2014 graduate of the School of Law here, and I earned both my law degree and my Master of Sport Administration and Leadership. My background is in sport and entertainment management. I have a degree in sport management, both my master's degree, but also my undergraduate degree, and a background in biological sciences. I spent a few years in kind of fitness and wellness. And then prior to that, I spent several years in technology, leadership, and operations. So a variety of experience before I entered law school. And then I've been on faculty at Seattle University for about the last 8 years, mostly teaching business law and sport law. My academic area of research is in sport and entertainment law. And I've been teaching in this program for the last 2 years. And I just recently stepped in to lead the program. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited you all decided to join us tonight. And I'm excited to chat all things healthcare compliance with Lisa. Thanks for joining us, Lisa. So our panelist this evening is Lisa. And before we get to her introduction, our agenda for the evening will be to introduce Lisa. We're going to talk about healthcare compliance and the course that Lisa teaches in our program. And then we'll just talk about next steps, and we're available to answer some questions for you all. I apologize also, I've got this weird background behind me. Ever the sport nerd that I am actually sitting downstairs at our Red Hawk Center on campus, and we have a women's basketball game going on upstairs. For those of you who are in the Seattle area or ever visit or are interested in visiting Seattle University's campus, we have a very lively athletics complex, and our basketball teams are doing quite well right now. So we are excited to cheer on our women's basketball team in a little bit. So Lisa, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me to address this group. I'm Lisa Estrada. I am currently the Executive Vice President and General Counsel at Scion Health, which has been in existence now for a little over a month. It is the spinoff of the company that I worked for previously, LifePoint Health. LifePoint combined on December 23rd with another company called Kindred, and then spun off Scion Health. And I moved from being the Chief Compliance Officer and Senior Vice President at LifePoint to being the EVP and General Counsel at Scion Health. So I am proof that you can be a lawyer who takes a non-traditional path to compliance and then somehow finds their way back to a very big job that sometimes overwhelms me. But I am really happy to have still the connections to compliance and to be teaching the healthcare industry compliance class. This is my second time. This is the second year that I've taught it. I have a law degree from George Mason University, and I have an undergraduate degree in political science and journalism from Indiana University of Pennsylvania. I worked for about 10 or 12 years in politics before I went to law school. After law school, I was working in a big firm for 14 years and then switched over to compliance to take on the SVP Chief Compliance Officer role at one of my clients, Fresenius Medical Care. So I have been in the healthcare regulatory, health law, and compliance space for about 22 or 23 years now. And I'm so excited to share it with you. I'm a little bit of a compliance geek, and particularly a healthcare compliance geek. So I'm happy to have the chance to share with you. So the question of what is healthcare compliance? It can be susceptible to a couple of different definitions, but for the most part, it relates to the fact that the healthcare industry, both the provision of products and services to patients, is highly regulated. And the reason why it is so highly regulated is because the dominant payer for healthcare services in the US is the government through the Medicare and Medicaid program. And so the government, in order to protect patients and beneficiaries and protect their dollars, the taxpayer dollars, puts in place a whole lot of laws, regulations, and program requirements that really, no matter where you are in any sector of the industry, you really have to pay attention to it because they are the largest payer. They set the standards. And so unless you are in a very, very narrow space like cosmetic surgery or LASIK surgery or something that doesn't have any government payment dollars behind it, you really have to pay attention to and comply with all of the laws, regulations, and program requirements that the government puts in place. Go on to the next one. And the reason you have to do that is because if you don't, you can be excluded from the Medicare and Medicaid programs. And there's really not a significant healthcare company or entity in the US that can afford to be excluded from those programs because they wouldn't be able to stay afloat in that case. So the primary enforcement of all of those rules is through the Office of Inspector General. So you have the CMS, or the Centers for, can you go back, Medicare and Medicaid Services, make the rules, and then the Office of Inspector General within the Department of HHS enforces them. And since about the mid 1980s, probably thereabout, the enforcement out of the OIG has been very, very aggressive. And the OIG has sought to recover billions and maybe trillions of dollars by now from healthcare providers and those who provide products and other types of equipment to healthcare patients. And as a result of that aggressive enforcement environment, pretty much every single healthcare provider has to put in place a compliance program. And that program is focused on protecting, detecting, and correcting non-compliant behavior. You never get it right 100% of the time, and the government doesn't expect you to get it right 100% of time. The book of regulations for the federal healthcare program, there are 3 volumes, and it's about a foot tall when you stack it up. But there are some key laws that if you violate them, you really do risk significant penalties and potential criminal or civil liability. And having a compliance program shows the government that it wasn't your design to violate the law, but that you have things in place to protect, detect, and correct, and can be something of an insurance policy. Okay, so I mentioned that this has been going on since the mid 80s, but I'll tell you, healthcare compliance is really hot right now. There are a lot of jobs in this sector. And the reason for that is healthcare is recession proof. It's even pandemic proof. There is the fastest sector of our growing sector of our economy. There is so much innovation happening, both in the products and the services, but even the payment models. And the government is really, really focused on changing the way that it pays for healthcare services from a fee for service, like every time you get a service, you get paid, which led to a lot of overutilization, to these alternative payment models, which are really, really complex and data-driven and create a lot of opportunity for mistakes or maybe even fraud. There's also really significant private investment dollars flowing into the healthcare industry right now. My company is private equity owned, and there are a lot of, it was taken private from public, and there's a lot of that happening. And when those private dollars are investing in these companies and planning to build them and grow them and then exit either through going public again or selling them, they really can't risk a big, gigantic, ugly compliance issue on the eve of that exit. And so they are recognizing the importance of an effective compliance program and investing heavily in programs. And so all of that put together, really, in order to do the things that we have to do, it requires scale across these very large organizations. So the larger the organization, the harder it is to prevent, detect, and correct. And so you've got industry consolidation happening in these very large healthcare entities with a lot of investment at stake. And so all of that has led to compliance in the healthcare sector being a really hot area. So going to sort of who succeeds in this space, I see a lot, and that's why I'm excited to teach in this program, a lot of second career people going into compliance. We have many former nurses, even former doctors, therapists, others going into the space, a lot of auditors. They have to kind of figure out how to shift their mindset a little bit, people who have been in the risk management space, and lawyers, that'd be me, and even people in sales and marketing. I think that part of the really interesting thing about compliance, what I get nerdy about, is it's really a little bit about behavioral science and marketing and figuring out how to get people to do the right thing, and to motivate them to really incentivize them to do the right thing. And so I've seen some people coming out of sales and marketing being really successful in a compliance career. I've also seen relatively new graduates, people with just a couple of years of work experience or even right out of school, come into compliance. And really, it's all about critical thinking skills, a learning orientation, and comfort with ambiguity. And that's a really big one. And when I mentioned the auditors, sometimes the auditors have trouble with that comfort with ambiguity piece, because in a lot of these areas, it's about variations and levels of risk and not clear-cut answers. And if you're a person who really wants to know the answer and wants to get it right and are a bit of a perfectionist, it might not be the right role for you. So sort of the training and skills that people need to have to be successful in healthcare compliance. I put approach and temperament down first. I think it's the most important. We spend a lot of time in my class at the beginning talking about what's the model, what should a compliance officer, how should they show up within their organization? And I give the option of teacher, police officer, lifeguard, or personal trainer. And here's a spoiler in case you take my class. The right answer is personal trainer. Because if you show up as a police officer, people will hide things from you. If you show up as a lifeguard to jump in and save people, they'll never learn to swim. If you show up as a teacher, it's great, but teachers don't really have the ability to hold people accountable beyond giving a grade, and then they leave and you're all done. So the personal trainer who really is getting to understand, learn the business, dig in, understand what the goals are, try to help somebody to reach their goals, to help them to be accountable, to help them to get stronger and to ultimately sort of do this on their own. These gigantic compliance organizations, these gigantic health organizations, they might have 40, 50 people in the compliance department for a company that has 40 or 50,000 people spread out across the country. You can't catch it all. So teaching people and encouraging them is important. So we spend a lot of time on that. And I think there are some people who are really prone toward that police officer mode, and they want to catch people and they want to punish them and they want to make sure it never happens again. And that may not be the right temperament. Also, a technical understanding of the effective tools for preventing, detecting, and correcting noncompliance. So that is all of the guidance that can be provided, the different controls and guardrails that can be put in place to prevent investigations, audits, and other things for detection, and an understanding of how HR works for the correction piece. And then the final thing I have here is subject matter expertise around key risk areas. I think maybe if you go to the next slide, I think I went into the key risk areas. Yeah, I've kind of gone through this, so I won't go through that first technical understanding again. But under subject matter expertise, there are, as I said, just a ton of regulations, but the key risk areas that most healthcare compliance programs focus on are what we call fraud, waste, and abuse, or an OIG program, and reimbursement integrity, meaning simply that you get paid what you're entitled to get paid, no more, no less. You have to really understand how the 60-day overpayment rule works, which is a rule that requires affirmative return of money that you've received that you're not entitled to, an investigation of that, and the False Claims Act, which is probably the biggest hammer on the civil side that the government has to go after money that healthcare providers have received when they shouldn't have. Inducements are about really corruption of physician decision making. So the government is very concerned that healthcare providers like hospitals that I work for will provide payments or anything of value to physicians. The physicians are really the gatekeepers. You have to have a physician order or a physician to say something is medically necessary, usually to make it covered by Medicare and payable by Medicare or Medicaid. And if your financial relationships between, for instance, a hospital and a physician are not at fair market value, there's a presumption that their decision making will be corrupted. It will be bad for patients, and it will lead to overutilization of healthcare services and overpayment by the government. And that is, it sounds simple, but it is there because there are so many relationships between physicians and hospitals. Making sure that all of those are fair market value and meet all of the regulatory requirements is a pretty intense ordeal. And then patient protections. So that would be things you're familiar with, like HIPAA, privacy and security. EMTALA, which is a rule that says that if you show up at the emergency room in an emergency state, a hospital has to stabilize you. They can't send you away or transfer you, and that's a federal law. So those are just some examples of the type of patient protections that we get focused on. So I think that's it. I would say just quickly about the class, what we try to do is make the class really practical. And we take prevention, detection, and correction. So I don't do a section on, it's not a law class, so we don't learn the elements of a False Claims Act crime or an Anti-Kickback Act. Instead, what we do is try to take prevention, detection, and correction and use examples around that, and have opportunities to really develop some guidance documents, to develop some controls, to think about how you might do an investigation, how you might interface with a key stakeholder. And so my hope is at the end of it that folks have enough practical experience to feel like they could step into one of these jobs and fend for themselves a little bit. So it's a lot of interaction with the students, and a lot of learning going on. So it's a lot of fun. That's it.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. I think that it's a really good highlight. I get a lot of questions around what makes an MLS degree in a law school different than a law degree, right? And certainly we have lots of lawyers, myself and you, and many of our professors are attorneys teaching our classes. And I think Lisa highlighted really well the difference between the practical application of, where an MLS will, our program will teach you how to interpret and synthesize the regulations and create policies and procedures and implementation processes to create programs for compliance in an organization. Whereas lawyers, generally, when you go to law school, you're learning to make arguments, right? Any kind of arguments, right? Very broad. You exit law school with a vast amount of law knowledge, and you can apply that in any area of law theoretically, and know how to research, write, craft all these arguments and write laws, and all sorts of different things. Whereas an MLS is going to instead, we've got a couple of different tracks, healthcare being one of them, healthcare compliance, and you'll exit that program with the ability to look at many different aspects of healthcare compliance, right? With a foundational knowledge of many different types of regulations applicable in the healthcare compliance field, and be able to interpret many of those regulations, be able to apply the or synthesize those regulations into processes and procedures and implement a compliance program in an organization. And certainly the, programs, or excuse me, the regulations will change over time. And you'll have the skills to, read and digest the revisions that come as new administrations and, the laws change. But you're not, it's a different, fundamentally a different type of degree than a law degree is. So I wanted to, I think you highlighted that really well, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think it's an important point to make that you don't need to be a lawyer to be a good compliance officer. In
Absolutely.
fact, I think oftentimes lawyers are hamstrung a bit. And I, having been both a lawyer and then a compliance officer and now a lawyer again, I think all the time about what the difference is. And I think in some ways I really liked the compliance role, because you would take what the lawyers are giving you. Here's the analysis, here's what you can do, what you can't do, and operationalize that. So it's sort of where the law meets the business, and you can be that person who helps the business to navigate through the legal guidance. And it's pretty fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, my background is in business operations, and I love that intersection of the law and the business operations. People often ask, well, how does sport fit in? Sport has a ton of compliance in it, and I really enjoy that too. So thank you. I appreciate the overview. A couple of quick notes, and then I'll open it up for questions. I'm certainly excited to hear what you all are interested in knowing. Some programming dates coming up. So we're a little bit early in the application cycle. We've gotten a few applications come in. Our priority deadline for applications for the online MLS is June 6th. So you've got plenty of time. And we have had some come in. We don't necessarily have a hard cap, but we definitely are, we don't want to overload our professors either, right? We tend to only run one section of a given class, and that's a lot of grading if we overload our professors. So we would cap it at some point. So keep that in mind. So the priority deadline is June 6th, and the classes begin September 6th. So you've got all summer to prepare. Everything is online, and I've got my contact information there also, and I'll leave that up for a few minutes. Feel free to email me at that email address. You're welcome to give me a phone call. The website is there also with more information on this course and other courses. We've got our other track, and you can also start your application there. You can get financial aid information, and the email address and the phone number are also there. And I'll leave that up for a few more minutes, and then there's the only slide after this is questions. So I will absolutely welcome questions, and I want to make sure that make sure that you all are able to ask questions. Sometimes in the screen share and webinar mode, you are not able to, but you're welcome to use the chat if for some reason you cannot unmute. Let's see. We'll go ahead and wonder if we have any video from attendees. Maybe not.
I guess we covered it, Kelly.
I know, I guess no questions. You're welcome to raise your hand if you like. I
there's
am
one.
able to, let's see. Oh, yes. So minimum number of credits each quarter is, it's a part-time program. So most of our students take 5 credits. That's about the minimum. And the reason for that, it's 2 classes, makes about 5 credits. We can allow you to take fewer, but usually we would just suggest that you take a semester off if you wanted to take fewer than 5 credits. You are required to finish the entire program within 4 years. And if you take fewer, it would put you out a little bit longer than 4 years. So it's better to take off an entire semester and then come back to it. It also starts to mess a little bit with financial aid because it's already a part-time program. So we suggest 5 credits and continuing at that rate. And that's part-time, and at 5 credits, you finish in 2 years. And it is fall. So we're on semesters. So it's fall, spring, and summer. So class would begin in fall, you'd go spring, summer, and fall, spring, summer, and you'd graduate in August of 23, I think, no, 24. Weeks are 14 weeks. The semesters are 14.
And it flies by.
It does fly by. It is a little bit confusing though. Seattle University generally is on a quarter system, but the law school is on a semester system. And I'm happy to, if you email me, I'm happy to share our academic calendar with you. I can email that to you. And we definitely, like, we put together all of that in the packets that we send out. Hours of study per week, it depends a lot on the courses, on each individual course. I hesitate to give a firm answer to that, but I will answer it in a couple of different ways. Generally, when you ask universities that, they will tell you that for every credit, you should expect 1 hour of in-class and 2 hours of out-of-class work per week for that 1 credit. So 3 hours total per week. However, so if that's 5 credits, you should expect 15 hours total of work per week for those 5 credits in a given semester. The reason that I don't love that particular formula is that I think that it's unfair to people who learn very differently. I, as an example, am a kinesthetic learner. I have difficulty reading and comprehending just by reading. I have to write things out. And that takes time. And I very much wish that that weren't the case, but it takes me a lot longer. So it's just how you learn. And some of our classes have more reading. Some of our classes have more videos. Some of our classes have more group discussions. Some of them have more group projects. So I think that it really depends. I think that the 3 hours per credit is a great starting point, and know that it will be plus or minus from there. Do you want to add anything to that, Lisa? I don't know if you.
Yeah, I think I was gonna say that I think so. Mine has some reading, but really the core is videos, and then there's a discussion every week that probably takes 45 minutes or an hour for the discussion. The videos are usually 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And then there's usually one other assignment that should take some time. My class is much more about sort of thinking and analyzing and thinking critically about what you're seeing and applying it. And so I would say it's like 5 to 7 a week for my students. And we only have 3 or 4 live classes. And I'm in the central time zone, and they're in Pacific.
Yeah,
and so the answer to the question about I think it is possible to work full-time, at least for my class. You can do pretty much everything on your own time frame, on your own schedule. And I definitely have people who do things very, very late at
Yeah.
night. And then the live classes are not particularly heavy, and we also record them. So if you had to miss a live class to work, you can watch it.
Right, yeah. The classes are scheduled such that if you work full-time, you can do it. Most of our students, almost all of our students work full-time. All of the classes are scheduled at what is usually a noon hour-ish Pacific, or most of them are scheduled at 6 p.m.-ish Pacific. And they are, most classes out of 14 weeks have a maximum of 4 or 5 live classes. And they are also recorded, so you can watch them later. And then the other lectures are pre-recorded, so there's no live class on that week. Everybody just watches them when it's convenient for them. And it dovetails nicely with the other question, or the next question. There is not a lot of group work. A couple of classes have group work. It's something that we are working to move away from because it is difficult for students to schedule across time zones. But it's very little group work. Those are good questions. A lot of research using Lexis. I wouldn't say that there's a lot of research using Lexis. I don't want to speak for other classes than my own. I do not have any research using Lexis in my class, or at least required. We do have a research course that students are required to take, and I would expect that they probably do have some research using LexisNexis or Westlaw. Having said that, you are given access, right? You are a student in the law school, so you will have access to that research, and you're able to use it, and you'll be taught how to use it, and you'll have access to librarians that can help you with that. So it's an excellent tool to know how to use if you're able to. And so I don't want to speak for other courses. I mean, it is an excellent tool, especially when you're looking up, federal rules and regulations. It is important to be able to use that. So I would expect to maybe have to use it a little bit. The international students, yes, international students would be admitted or able to be admitted. The only restriction for international students is that they are not eligible for financial aid. And that's just a restriction with the United States government. So there's some issues there. And I don't believe, and we'd have to work with our International Student Center with any visa issues, but there may or may not be some visa issues there. I can't imagine that there would be, given the online nature, but I'm not certain. Major points of differentiation between our program and other schools. I think that Seattle University generally, and the School of Law specifically, one of the major things that differentiates us is that we really focus our pedagogy, and our style of teaching is very centered around critical thinking and social justice. So a lot of our courses are very much centered around pushing our students to think about the impacts of the solutions to the problems that they're being asked to solve, right? If we are posing a problem to students and asking them to create a solution, we are also going to ask them to think about the impacts that that solution is going to have on people that they might not intend to impact, or populations that they might not intend to impact. We're going to ask them to consider what unintentional consequences their solutions might trigger. We have very candid discussions about race and inequities and social justice issues. And I mean, one of the things that I really like about the culture and environment at Seattle U is that we don't shy away as professors from what other universities and teachers might consider to be third rail issues. I personally don't shy away from them. And I mean, it's not to say that we are doing it to be, antagonistic, but these are uncomfortable conversations. And when we have conversations around things that touch legal issues and regulations, there are systemic structures in place that have negative impacts. And those impacts are uncomfortable, and they do not get more comfortable because we don't talk about them, right? Like, our inability to have those discussions doesn't make it easier. So it's our job to engage around those conversations and to encourage our students to engage around those conversations. And it doesn't mean there's a right answer. It doesn't mean that we're looking for a right answer. It just means that we are asking our students to engage in the conversation and to have the courage to bring their whole self to that space. And that's a really difficult thing to do. I applaud my students every day for being willing to go there with me. I applaud you all right now for sitting here, because I am certain that you did not enter this webinar thinking that you were going to enter this space with me, right? So like, that's who Seattle U is. We do it every single day, in the law school, in the business school, all over the place. And that's hard. So yeah, I mean, like, I think that that's one of the major things that you will find here. And sure, like, of course we talk about healthcare, of course we talk about finance, of course we talk about business law and all of the things. But those things, like, that happens, like, those conversations come up, right? When you're talking about law, those conversations come up. So I think that's one of the biggest points of differentiation. I think that, less heavy, we have done, particularly in this program, I'm new-ish to the program. I've been on faculty with the program for a couple of years. Most of the professors that are teaching on faculty in this program have been here since the beginning of the program. We've been teaching with it for a couple of years. But the university and the School of Law have been here for a long time, and we're celebrating our 50th year. The School of Law is celebrating its 50th year. The university has been around for 100 years. And we have a rich tradition around learning and what it means to learn and what it means to ask critical questions. And this program, the idea of taking that critical thinking into an online space is awesome, and we're excited to go there. And we were doing it before the pandemic, and the pandemic and Zoom law school has only like skyrocketed it. And I think that we have in Seattle the skills and the expertise to do it really, really well. So I'm excited for where we're going to go. And I think that that's one of the things that differentiates us also. We've got a lot of resources here to do it really well. So I'll step off my SU soapbox. I've been here long enough that, like, if there's anybody who drinks the SU Kool-Aid, like, it's me. you should see my office. Like, I'm not in my regular office right now, but it's like got all kinds of Seattle U stuff. Weakness in math and statistics, compulsory components. Honestly, it's not math and statistics that we see our students struggle with. Our students struggle with their writing. And that is because even though we are not asking you all to be lawyers, Seattle U has a very, very strong legal writing program. And we are definitely asking you all to be polished professional writers. We take great pride in our legal writing program. We take great pride in the professionalism that our writing program graduates our students, right? Like the graduates that we put out into the world. And that is, it's not rigorous in that you're not going to be writing novels or anything, but legal writing is a very, very different art form than any other writing. When I came into law school, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I thought I was an exceptional writer before law school, and legal writing is just so, so different. So I would encourage you to be patient with yourselves as you learn legal writing. It can be very tedious. It can be very pedantic. It's very precise. And when we start to take business folks and introduce them to the legal sphere, it's challenging. And it's when you start to interface with lawyers can, we can be a little bit tedious and pedantic sometimes. But it is really important because the lawyers, like, that's what the lawyers do, right? They have to be tedious and pedantic. And, we get admonished by judges for going over, one page over 25 pages of a page limit, right? We get admonished for those sorts of things. So, those are some of the things that we see our students struggle with. The math, I don't think, is going to be much of an issue. Statistics is not something this isn't a master's program where you have to do original research. And I mean, there is a capstone, but it doesn't require original research in that way. So statistics is not usually a concern. It's the writing and just being patient with yourselves, taking the feedback, even when it seems like we're being a little bit nitpicky. We're being nitpicky for a reason. These are really great questions. Feel free to ask more. I'm trying to think of some of the other questions I get regularly. One of the questions I got recently was like, what's a minimum GPA? I'm seeing this other question too. I'll get that in a minute. We don't actually have a minimum GPA. We definitely look at the whole application. We've seen applicants with lower GPAs, but some people will submit GREs or LSATs if they happen to have them, if they've applied to law school before or whatever. We don't require tests, but you're welcome to submit them if you have them. Make sure that you do send in your transcripts. Sometimes people forget that, or your school is lagging behind and hasn't submitted them. But we look at personal statements too. So definitely make sure you get in all the items. Textbooks are not included with tuition costs. How much do they typically cost? That widely varies. Textbooks, unfortunately, are like this unbelievably unreasonable cost. I have moved to a publisher that publishes a book that is about 50 some dollars. So I try really, really hard to keep costs down. I know that some books in our program are upwards of 150. It varies dramatically. It's really difficult. I'm able to keep my book down because I teach business law, which is a relatively, I mean, there's a bazillion books out there on business law, right? So I have a lot to choose from, and it's a relatively stable doctrine. Not much changes. There are some of our more specialized courses, you have 2 books maybe that are published on it. And it's a doctrine that is evolving every single year. And it's just really difficult to find books. So I definitely sympathize with our students in just their inability to like, well, our professors also, right? Our inability to like find good texts. I do appreciate that many of them are available on Amazon and you can rent them. I shouldn't say like Amazon specifically, you can rent them from our bookstore also. But there's many places to rent them. You can also usually find them on like an electronic copy online through the publisher. So there are options. A couple of our classes too use almost exclusively online sources and don't have a textbook. Any other questions? I am certainly happy to hang out for a few more minutes if there aren't any other questions, if anybody wants to kind of like hang out. How long to make admissions decisions? I like to give people the answer that it will, I like to tell people that it will take, that I can turn them around in about 4 weeks. It often takes me far less. Usually our admissions committee meets every couple of weeks and kind of goes through the decisions that we have on the applications that have come in. The reason that I like to give us a little bit more time is that sometimes, you know, the admissions committee, like if we just can't find a time to meet, then it might take us longer. For a while, we were waiting for some materials to come back and we had decisions out, or well, we had decisions made, but we just couldn't get decisions out because we were waiting for materials to come back. So give us a few weeks. We do have a couple of applications in right now. And I would also caveat that sometimes if you've submitted your application, you might think that it's been submitted, but your transcripts might not have gotten to us yet. So make sure that you check on your transcripts with your undergraduate institutions or other institutions, because if we don't have them, then your application isn't submitted yet to us, even though you might have submitted it. So you can always email us and let us know, or ask us and we can let you know if we have your transcripts. But once we have everything, usually within about a month. Of course, thank you all for being here. You are welcome to hang out if you like. If you have other questions, feel free to email me, or you're welcome to give me a phone call. If you think of something later, feel free to email me. I am happy to get back to you or set up a phone call. If you would love to just set up a call and chat about everything separately, that's fine. I'm happy to set up a phone call with you. Sorry, I'm feeling pretty lazy today too. It's Wednesday and, you know, let's see. Oh, which institutions do we use to translate degrees from? I do not know. Usually they just arrive in our offices already translated. I don't know who translates them. But we do, if you're applying online, or excuse me, if you're applying from international schools, we do require a translated and certified translation into English. But I don't know who we've used before. We don't do them. They arrive to us that way. And I don't actually think it's on the FAQ. I am not sure. The US certification, I don't know. You might check on the FAQ. I don't think it's on there though. If you send me an email with that question, I can look into it and see if I can get an answer back to you tomorrow. I'll look for you.
Kelly, I'm about to turn into a pumpkin.
Yes, of course.
Late on the East
Thank you
Coast.
so much for your help. I
All
really
right,
appreciate it. Overseas credits it really depends. Usually the certifying agency will match it up and tell us what it like converts to. No worries. Thank you so much. I hope you have a really great evening. Thanks everyone for joining.